Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. We're finally going to end the Belli story. So I told you to hang in there. It's worth hearing about. Let's have our coffee. Oh, I'm so glad to see you today. You all look really good. Oh, I gave up on the false eyelashes today. I tell you. Anyway, I won't go into that because I'm going to finish the Belli story and then I have something else to say. Believe it or not. I left off, we were in Hawaii, and President Johnson had come to be there, and Mel went off, and then he came back, and there was a tidal wave alert. There really was a tidal wave alert. And then they called it off after about an hour or so. So we head then for San Francisco. And I told Mel that whatever we had to do to annul that marriage or whatever, that I couldn't live with him. And he got very sulky. He wouldn't really talk about it. He just got sulky. And on the way home, he entertained everybody on the plane, and of course they were all like agog, and as I had been. And when we arrived in San Francisco, of course, I've told you there were topless girls from North Beach there to throw rice at us. They weren't topless at the airport, but that's who they were. Well, a couple of them were topless. They had coats on and they'd flash, and I was just, that's just not me, I'm not a prude, but I don't like that. But the key thing that made me really, really depressed was some of my family was there, to my surprise, to greet us. My brother and his wife and two of my sisters, and they were so excited. And so I introduced Mel, but I was very concerned about the whole thing, and I introduced him, and he was very kind of casual about it, not warm at all. And as we walked away, and I pray my siblings didn't hear, I don't think they did, he said, "Oh, more mouths to feed." I go like, no, my brother's an educator, he works in the schools, and they're all accomplished people. So, it just got worse and worse. And it dawned on me, finally, that Mel married me for my publicity value, because that was all important to him. And that's what he did. So, an arm piece. That was a beautiful arm piece. So anyway, then when we got there, it was, I went to my apartment, he went to his. And he came over the next evening while I was trying to figure it out and talking to lawyers. He said, well, we're kind of stars of the film festival that opens tonight, and we're going to go. And I said, no, I'm not going. And he said, you'll be embarrassed if you don't, because they'll be writing about it in the paper. And I knew they would. And I thought, well, okay, I'll put my evening gown on and go smile and pretend everything's okay for this evening. So I did. And we were at a dinner at the Fairmont. And Jane Mansfield was there. Beautiful, voluptuous Jane Mansfield. And she was flirting with Mel, and he was flirting back. And I thought, I don't care. But I did care when she dropped part of the top of her dress and flashed a breast. Something just came over me. And I got up, and I walked over to her, and I said, stop it. Just stop it. And I pulled her dress back up. And I said, that's not cute or funny. And went back, Anyway, it was one of the few times I lost my temper. But the real crux of this ending of my relationship with Mel Belli was when he had to go to Houston to speak at a law conference, and he wanted me to go with him. And I said, no, Mel, I'm not going to stay married to you. I have to figure this out. And I had no money, I had to work and all kinds of things. But I drove him to the airport. He leaned over and kissed me goodbye. And that was the last time I saw him. From then on, he communicated with me through the press. And I had hired a lawyer, George Davis, who said, Pat, we have to get him to admit that he didn't sign certain papers that we'd been asked to sign. And I said, okay, what, it's in your hands, but I've got to get out of this. And he said, yes, you do. I go home and I am in my living room and the phone rings, and it's Abe Mellenkopf. Now, those of you who live in the Bay Area and have lived there a long time will know that name. He was the editor of the Chronicle and a very nice, powerful man. And he called me and said, Pat, have you seen the paper today? And I said, no. He said, well, do you have it? I said, yes. Look at page 4. Now, this is the synchronicity. You're not going to believe. My whole life was kind of that way. There was a story inside about a couple, an American couple, getting married in a Shinto ceremony in Japan, but they hadn't signed certain papers, and the papers we hadn't signed, and so they weren't legally married. They weren't married. So Abe said, Pat, you can get out of this. Now, he knew I hadn't said anything, publicly, but he knew I should never have been, quote, married to Mel Belli. So in court, we did take it to court. We had to go to court because Mel kept saying, no, we're married. Absolutely, I'll sign any paper she wants me to sign. We'll go to Sonora and we'll be married there in a beautiful ceremony. Of course, he'd love that. More publicity, it'd be a huge story. And so I just ignored it. But all of this was coming through the press to me, not from him. So in court, my attorney decided to ask for money. I didn't want any money, but he said, we have to flush him out. So when he asked for money, I couldn't contain myself. Again, my temper was showing. I stood up at the counsel table and said, I don't want one red dime from that man. And the judge hammered his gavel and he said, go sit in the back of the courtroom, Ms. Muntendon. You're not to explode like that in my court. And if you say another word, I'm going to have you go somewhere else. You won't be able to stay in the courtroom. So I go like, okay, very meekly. The long and the short of it is that without Mel ever coming to court, and everything happened through his attorney, because he said, as I wrote on Facebook, that he was hunting hare in Belgium. He didn't have the time to be bothered with this little matter. So, that's what I was dealing with. And of course, everything was in the paper, news, and it was fodder. Of course it was. If I were reporting then, I would have written about it too. So, in the middle of all this, a very funny thing happened. Before I met Mel, I had been dating Dr. Rudy Noble. And he's a whole other story, just a wonderful, funny guy. And he took me to Trader Vic's for dinner, and he gave me a book. And the book was Learning Japanese in a Hurry. I love that. Of course, Herb Caen loved that too, our local columnist. So anyway, the long and short is that the marriage was set aside as an event that never happened. And the only money that changed hands was a check that was handed to my attorney for his fees. And my attorney made sure that that check was in his hand before he would ever sign off on all of this, because he knew Mel, that, you know, he couldn't be trusted, God knows. But you know, I do not regret that happening. It took me a while to get over I was embarrassed and felt like an idiot and so forth. But I didn't need to. You know, it was an adventure. I didn't hurt anybody. I was hurt. But so, I think that the lesson in all that, and I think that everything is a lesson here in this Earth School, was that I needed to look into motives more carefully, because I'd been so trusting. My nature is to be trusting. So my father was. And my mother didn't trust anybody, but I was just like my father. I trust everybody. So I learned a lesson, and I would like to say that if any of you are being abused in any way, if there's emotional abuse, it doesn't have to be hitting. Emotional abuse is just as damaging as any other kind. Please get out of it. Please don't take it. You don't have to. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. You deserve kindness. You deserve love. You deserve all good things in life. We all do. And then we don't need to feel ashamed about what we've gone through, because in the long run, once you take care of it, you can look back and say, I learned a lesson. Okay, that won't happen to me again. Thank you for listening to this long, drawn-out story, the soap opera of Mel Belli and Pat Moulton. Have a good day, darling. Good day. Bye-bye.